which I have to say, just to look at a contract before giving advice is ludicrous.
We'll talk about that.
It's dark down here. It's quite poor. Hello, my name is Ian J. Cole. Welcome to my channel. This channel is all about music and art, and this is one of a series of videos about how to start a UK-based record label. And this is part 19. So if this is the first time that you've been here, my advice is to go back to right to the beginning and work your way through the videos. And if you've got any questions at any point, post me a comment and we'll try and answer your questions. This is one of a two-part video about contracts. Now we're going to cover in this video the types of contract that are available that you might need in the music business. Now I am not a legal expert, so you would always be advised that take what I say with a pinch of salt, really. But we're going to focus on all the other contracts apart from the recording contract in this video. So the recording contract is going to be in the next video, which will be video 20. I am no expert, but I have spent the last 40 years in the music industry in a very small way, and I do run a small record label. Now the first thing to say is that there are several types of contract that you may be involved in. We're particularly interested in the recording contract, and I will come on to that, but let's just have a quick look at the types of contracts. Now there's a very good site here which is actually called vocalist.org.uk. It looks like a site from the 1980s really, but the information that they've got on there is particularly good, and I'll put links down below to where you can find this page, because there are free example contracts of different types. So we have a band agreement, we've got a booking contract, we've got an invoice and receipts contract, we've got a management contract, publishing contract, record contract, and what somebody called a submissions letter. But we'll have a quick look at all of these. Now, first of all, I have some experience of some of these things. So certainly I have been involved in bands where we've had to sign contracts for gigs, but we'll go through these in a particular order. Let's first of all look at a band agreement. I was part of a band back in the mid to late 80s, and we agreed to have a band agreement, which we did get a solicitor to draft for us. Basically, the only time you might need a band agreement is when it's always a good idea to get this stuff sorted out fairly early on. Is it about who does the hiring and firing of the band, what happens if somebody leaves, what are the aims, and do people in the band have particular jobs? What happens about the band logo if the band splits up? That type of thing. So it's good to get that sort of stuff out of the way right at the beginning. The other thing is, what about songwriting? If the band's writing original material, do you have a band agreement about whether everybody takes a share, or is it that one person writes the songs and brings those songs, but there is some sort of a publishing agreement so that they may get a small percentage for working the song up in rehearsals, things like that? What happens with disagreements? So I would tend to say that you might not necessarily need to have this agreement ratified by a solicitor, because the minute you start to get lawyers and solicitors involved, it starts to cost money. And I'm going to come back onto that. But it's not a bad idea for a band to have some sort of written agreement that you've all signed that becomes a legal document. And the easiest probably way of doing it is to write a simple agreement between the group and get somebody to witness it, really, and date it. Let's go and look at what be considered a booking contract. Now, if you're working for, maybe you've got a management or maybe you've got an agent. Now, certainly in music agents, if you're working, shall we say, what used to be called the working men's club scene, or you're working in nightclubs, that type of thing, quite a lot of the time you'll have an agent's contract. So they will send you through a contract. You are going to be paid a fixed a fee for that performance, and you'll have to sign it. Now, I've signed loads of these in the past. Usually it's between the agent or the booker and one member of the band whose responsibility it is for signing that. Now, in the band that I played in back in the 80s, my role was to liaise on the band's behalf. We did have a band manager, but they would send through the contracts from the agents, and one of us would have to sign it, and it was my role to sign those contracts. And we never had any issues about the particular contracts, although I would always be particularly careful about when a contract said that it was what was called a no pickup. So we as a band really didn't like where we didn't get paid on the night, but occasionally we would have to sign contracts and the money would go to the manager. And then based on that, we should have normally got paid. What tended to happen is that it would take months for those payments to come through to the manager, and we would actually withhold our manager's fee, which was 15% back in the 80s. We would withhold his fee until those amounts were paid, so that it was, part of his job to actually get those monies in on our behalf. We never really liked that. We used to have situations where we would be waiting for literally hundreds of pounds worth of money because it would go back maybe 6 or 7 months, and it always seemed quite messy for us. We always liked the jobs where we would go and do the gig, we'd sign the contract, we got paid on the night, and we occasionally had disputes with the venue. I do remember I was a member of Equity at the time, and having an Equity membership card as a musician was really, really useful, because you could threaten to blacklist the venue if they didn't agree to the contract that they'd signed, saying that they were going to pay you on the night. And 2 or 3 times in the few years that we were performing, we did do that. So there's an example here of the type of sort of thing that you would see on these sort of contracts. It'll tell you how much you're going to get paid, and there's a couple of examples, and there's also an example of a booking letter that you can that you may see. So I mean, that's quite useful if you've never come across one of those sort of contracts. Let's just have a quick look at the invoicing and receipts. These are example invoices that you may need to give to the venue when you get paid. So if they've paid you £300, £500 for a performance, then you're going to have to give them some sort of invoice. The grey area for this type of thing, and it was where I always had a battle. I played in a duo in the 90s, and we were VAT registered. It was a real problem getting them to pay the VAT. We were giving them a VAT invoice at the end of each gig, but they wouldn't pay what was, I think it was 15% at the time was the VAT. Obviously it's now 20%. We ended up saying to the agents and the bookers that what you need to do is you need to tell the venue that we are VAT registered. So if it's a £300 fee, it's £300 plus the 20% VAT. And it was a real battle for quite a while, really. So if you are VAT registered, you need to be aware that there may be issues about that. It shouldn't really be an issue, because the VAT, the club should really, as a business, should be VAT registered, because they will probably be turning over enough above the threshold, but also they will be able to claim the VAT back. That's what part of the VAT system's about. So let's have a look at the next one. The next contract is a management contract, and I pretty much covered my thoughts on management contracts in the previous video, in number 17 and 18, where we were looking at artist management. My feeling, as I said in those videos, was that ideally it'd be better to have your manager as part of the band, so that they are on an equal share, and they would form, if you had a band agreement, then they would form part of that, and it would be quite good to outline what exactly bands and the manager's expectations are in that contract. if you sign to, shall we say, one of these larger management companies where they've got a stable of artists, then you're going to have to get some legal advice as to what to do with the contract that your manager wants you to sign. It's worth mentioning at this point that getting legal representation, getting somebody to look at a contract, seems these days to be ridiculously expensive. I've just found a company here called Laudit Music, and they're very upfront about their costs. Where is it? Here it is. Laudit offers a comprehensive drafting service for recording contract. They say it's a recording contract, but it could just as easily be a management contract. And their fees are £1,500 plus VAT. It could be less. It could be, a draft agreement could be between £750 plus VAT and £2,000 plus VAT. If you already have a template contract and you've been offered they're saying they're talking about a recording contract, but if you've been offered a contract, we will advise you for the same and make amendments for £500 plus VAT. This seems to be the way that contracts generally are working, not just about music contracts. We've recently sold our music shop business, and the new lease that the new owner of the business was taking over, which was a very straightforward contract, and there was a couple of things in there that that weren't in our original contract that we signed 7 years ago. I'd already explained to that there was a decent landlord, but the contract, for him to get a solicitor to look at the contract, was going to cost £1,500 plus VAT, which I have to say, just to look at a contract before giving advice is ludicrous. So, as I've said before, if you can avoid getting lawyers involved, you're going to save yourself a lot of money. And certainly, I think this is just a ludicrous amount of money for legal advice. I don't know that there's no easy way around that. If you've got a contract, you either read through it and take a risk, or do you actually pay to have somebody? If it's a major record deal, you're going to have to, really, because if there's hundreds of thousands of pounds advance being involved in this, then you need to get some legal advice, because the contract could tie you up for years. We're going to get onto record contracts, but certainly from a management point of view, I wouldn't be keen to sign a contract with a manager that needed me to go and seek legal representation. And I have been in bands where we've had management contracts. They probably weren't worth the paper they were written on, and usually they would outline exactly what the manager was going to do, and if they're fairly straightforward, then sign it. But it's so difficult when when a lot of these contracts get couched in legalese. It's a real minefield, and it's impossible to advise you, because each contract will be different. Certainly the contracts that we had with managers, we did sign them, we didn't take legal representation, and luckily in those cases we didn't have any problem. The other thing is that the managers, they are your representative, and can you take this person on trust? If the answer is no, then maybe you shouldn't be signing a contract with this person. Anyway, certainly it is a minefield, and it's certainly something to watch out for. Let's have a look at the next one. The next one is a publishing contract, and we've covered publishing quite in detail, but here is an example publishing contract that you can read through at your leisure, and I'm sure it will outline the percentage of royalties. We'd already talked about that in previous videos. I'm going to come back to the recording contract, but let's just jump and look at what is a submission and cover follow-up letter. All right, okay, this is about getting it's the sort of example letter that you might use to send some demos to a record label or an A&R person, which you may find quite useful. And there are some sort of follow-up letters. So they're templates, really, that you can copy if you're going to be sending your demos out to publishers, record labels, maybe even managers. So that's quite useful. Now, I don't want this video to be too long, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down into two halves. We're going to spend the next video looking specifically at the recording contract. and we'll spend the whole of that video looking at the recording contract. I hope you found that useful. If you like what I do, hit the subscribe button, and a like's always much appreciated. And if you've got any questions that I can answer, please pop them in the comments down below. And thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks very much. Bye bye.